Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Charm. So welcome. So again, we will have our guest speaker. I would say the host today, actually, Mr. Denis Yip, the CEO of ASTRI. So he's going to share with us his thoughts about GBA and particularly how technology can make a difference. So without further delay, I will invite Mr. Denis Yip to share with us his thoughts first, and then we'll have a chat later on. How's that? Dennis?
Thank you, Dr. Cham. Let me move to the stage. We actually have a bunch of charts because, first of all, welcome ASTRI attendees here on site in the Zoom. And also thank you for the GBA Business School students to join us. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about GBA, they talk about 9+2 cities and how GBA works. I want to have a little bit different perspective in terms of how we look at the world. And then we will basically move to what the world is, the GBA is, and what is ASTRI and how ASTRI participates in the GBA. So the agenda looks like this, but let me move to the 14th five-year plan. As all of you know, actually there are many different parts of the 14th five-year plan. So here, I would like to have different topics of 14th five-year plan, and then together we look at the INT, Innovation and Technology Ecosystem. So in the 14th five-year plan, basically we designed to have Hong Kong as the international INT hub. And we want to strengthen the national strategic science and technology power, meaning more and more research and development and more patents in this area. We also want to develop Hong Kong into a regional IP trading center, meaning using Hong Kong to have the East meets West, fostering Hong Kong as the functional platform of the Belt and Road Initiative, and then promote the dual circulation, which you have heard before in terms of the internal circulations and the external circulations. Now, my background is from technologies. As you know, many years with IBM, many years with EMC, Dell, 2 Chinese companies, and then Belt and Road Initiative. I was the commissioner for 2.5 years. So I want to start with the Belt and Road Initiative. This is an area that started from Chairman Xi in 2013 and basically looking into how the world should transform into. And when we started the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, it's more of infrastructure type of investment. And now you have the Silk Road funding, you have the AIB funding, a lot of different fundings in terms of infrastructure projects. Now, this is a very important area because with the Belt and Road Initiative, Hong Kong as the INT, Innovation and Technology Ecosystem, can participate not just for mainland China, but also outside mainland China to use our technologies. Traditionally, Hong Kong is very strong in the finance area, in the real estate area, in the logistics areas, but the participation in the Belt and Road heated up when the country actually started the Belt and Road Initiative to have the Hong Kong professional bodies participation. Now, this goes into actually beginning of 2021. We talk about the RCEP Alliance. If you have not heard about RCEP, it's the Regional Cooperative Economic Partnership, which is basically 15 countries with China, Australia, New Zealand, ASEAN, Japan, and Korea. Now, this is a very important initiative because within the next 5 to 10 years, you will see all these 15 countries have no trade barriers, meaning that they will have free trade across different areas. US, of course, is envying this and talk about CPTPP and talk about wanting to participate in the RCEP areas right now. Why do I mention this? Hong Kong can be a blessing in RCEP and can be a threat in RCEP. Depends on how you look into it. Why do I say that? Now, Hong Kong traditionally is the door to outside China. If you look at 20 years ago, basically the Hong Kong GDP is much more than Shenzhen. It's the other way around now. But at that time, actually Hong Kong is the door in most of the international trading from China. Now, with RCEP, there is a threat because when the RCEP happens, which is in the next 5 to 10 years, basically right now Hong Kong can do free trade with ASEAN because we have the free trade agreement. We have the free trade agreement with Australia. We have the free trade agreement with New Zealand. However, mainland China does not have the free trade yet. So if RCEP happens, that means that Shanghai and Beijing and the inner province of China can do trade directly with outside without involving Hong Kong. So that's why within the next 5 years, Hong Kong needs to pick up in terms of how we bridge the gap in the innovation and technology area. And we are doing that. So, but we want to pick this up much faster so that we have the strength to do it. Now, ASEAN is very important in terms of the next biggest growth economy. Now, if you look at ASEAN, I mean, the people are young. Think about it. Hong Kong average citizen age 46. ASEAN, if you look at any of these countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, the average age is around 25 to 29. So they are energetic. They are growing very fast. Some of them have economic stability issues. Some don't. So it depends on which one you look at. I mean, Myanmar, for example, is not something that you want to invest in right now because of the political turmoil. But most of the ASEAN political stability is there. And the population is basically spending money. So the world knows that ASEAN is the growing engine. And Hong Kong needs to pick up the gap between how to invest and how to basically connect the dots between mainland China and ASEAN. Otherwise, basically, we'll be losing the edge. So if you look at Greater Bay Area, which is the topic of today, now Greater Bay Area, if you look at the 4 clusters, basically it's, right now it's number 3 in terms of GDP. We are still behind the New York metropolitan area. We are behind the Tokyo Bay Area, but not by much. I anticipate that within the next 2 years, Greater Bay Area will be number 1. Now, Greater Bay Area, again, I'm not going to talk about which 9 cities and 9+2, etc. But basically, we have a lot of policies that are in common, and we have a lot of new policies that support Hong Kong INT ecosystem. However, it's still one country, 2 systems. That means that, good or bad, right? The good thing is basically you can leverage the international trade. So it's USD currency in Hong Kong. You got the common law, which mainland is not common law. You get the dispute resolutions basically center in Hong Kong rather than in mainland. So a lot of things that we can capture from the Hong Kong standpoint, which is the good part. Now, the bad part is Hong Kong needs to think about how to participate in the Greater Bay Area to be seamlessly involved in the INT, because we are behind right now in versus Shenzhen in this area. So how do we bridge the gap in terms of how do we get internationalized in the INT is very important. Now let me show you some examples. Now GBA has 40 plus unicorns right now. As you know, unicorn is any company from startup to 1 billion in terms of net worth, right? And the biggest one, Dajiang, as you know, the drones company, they are 24 billion, 24 the size of one unicorn. We have WeBank, we have SenseTime, we have Meiju and UBTech, etc. And these kind of unicorns, actually, I anticipate will grow more and more in the Greater Bay Area because of the policy of the 14th five-year plan that the country is supporting the growth of GBA. And we as INT professionals need to capture that. We cannot wait in terms of all these policy differences. 5 key industries. So we have fintech, biotech, e-commerce, health tech, and robotics. There are more, but we can see that Hong Kong, for example, can be the central point for all these 5. Right? We are strongest in fintech. More and more biotech startups are coming up. E-commerce, health tech, robotics. We all have a lot of experience. So Hong Kong as a GBA core cities plays a pivotal role in global INT. And the Hong Kong government knows that. They have put in a lot of money, which I will talk about a little bit later, in terms of how to nurture the whole INT ecosystems. So with the established sectors, what we want to do is basically INT will become the emerging sector. And this is one of my dreams, right? When my kids ask about, what they want to study and things like that, ask about different parents. A lot of time people say, oh, Hong Kong has 2 industries, not INT, right? It's banking, finance, or real estate. So on a parent's advice, usually we say, oh, don't go to real estate because it's all dominated by the big families. And if you're not part of the big families, you don't have a lot of opportunities. So go finance. Now, this needs to be changed. If Hong Kong needs to become the INT center of the Greater Bay Area, we need the younger generation, first of all, to study STEM. Second of all, is to have opportunities after they study STEM. Now, I'm sitting in ASTRI, the Technovation Center. So all of you have, most of you, I would say 98% of you have studied STEM and come to this point. But I think the younger generation needs to know that Hong Kong can be the INT hub of the Greater Bay Area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Look at the unicorns, right? And Hong Kong right now has 12 plus unicorns. There's a press a couple months ago that says that Hong Kong has 18. I did some research, is between 12 and 18. Actually, the other 6 is not in Hong Kong, but owned by Hong Kong citizens, Hong Kong people. So it's actually 12. But of course, the press media can define what they want to say. So I'm happy with 18 also. So with the 12 to 18 unicorns, many of them are fintechs. So WeLab Bank, Animalcurs, Air Wallets, Deep Tech with Sense Time, logistics, cryptocurrency, tourism instead of Klook. One thing I want to mention is Hong Kong is very interesting because if you want to become a unicorn, you cannot rely on 7.5 million people in Hong Kong to become a unicorn. So you need to think ahead of time where you want to be. And everybody wants to be in the world, right? The whole world use me is great. However, the world is changing. So what we talked about before of globalization, if you have read the book 15, 20 years ago on different globalization books, the world is flattened. Now, everything has changed, unfortunately. The US versus China, some people say the Cold War, some people say it's a soft war, but basically that is happening every day. So for Hong Kong startup to become a unicorn, they need to think about where their market is. For example, Sense Time, where their market is. Mainland, right? Most of the business is mainland. They're very good in facial recognition. They're very good in a lot of different areas. And they're listed. They want to go listed in IPO in Hong Kong. And then 24 hours ago, actually 48 hours ago, they got banned from US. US say they cannot invest. And one of their biggest investor is actually from US. So what happened, right? They delisted, return back the money, and then have a different strategy. So these things happen because of the US-China trade war, and this will happen more and more. Now look at Klook. They become a unicorn. If Klook is actually tourism software, they become a unicorn because of Hong Kong? No, they started from Hong Kong. They become big because of ASEAN and Japan, right? They move very fast in ASEAN, they move very fast in Japan, and that makes them become unicorn. Now, of course, there are different areas that people look at. Animalcurs, right? Very hot right now. Professor Yes Siu, and just got an investment this week from Adrian Chang, right? New World. Actually, he invested in one of his subsidiary, Sandbox. But they have the vision of doing acquisition of Sandbox a few years ago. Actually, Sandbox is not owned by them, right? It's actually owned by an outside company. And they invested into Sandbox and then got different investments, SoftBank, etc. So becoming a unicorn is not as easy as one thinks. And, being successful in the technology community is not easy because you need to think about where your market is. Are you going to move your market to mainland? Are you going to move the market in ASEAN? Are you going to move your market in the world? Right? And everybody thinks about the world. And my advice is, don't think about the world right now. Think about whether your market, your next step is Greater Bay Area, mainland, or ASEAN, and then move to the rest of the world. Because if you try to do everything at once, you cannot be very successful. And there are different camps, as I said. If you look at the I&T ecosystem, right? You look at the left side is the what I call the Western camp, right? Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, HP, Intel, Apple. What is in common? Mostly U.S. companies, and majority of the companies cannot do business in China. Actually, I know a lot of MNCs are in China right now, but declining very fast, right? On the right side is the Chinese camp, right? And the Chinese camp because Tencent, Baidu, JD, Huawei, Alibaba. What's in common? The same. They're doing very well in mainland. They cannot participate in US. Right? Huawei actually moved out their US operations. Right? And a lot of these happen. Even in ASTRI, when we try to put our stuff in cloud, traditionally we were thinking about, Amazon Cloud and Microsoft Azure, we are fine. Now, if you look at our IT department, they'll get pressure and say, look, my customers are across the world. So I need to move not just in the US cloud. I want to change to, Tencent Cloud or Huawei Cloud or Ali Cloud. So you can see that we need to think where we play and then what can we participate in. And different areas, we are doing different things. So another hot topic, right? Metaverse. Everybody's talking about Metaverse. And in the center is the 7 layers. And I can tell you that ASTRI is probably participating in 6 layers out of 7. We have the VR, AR, AI technologies. We didn't call it Metaverse, of course, until Facebook changed their name to Meta. Now we are calling that to be Metaverse. Also different camps, right? On the left side, the Western Metaverse camp. On the right side is the Chinese Metaverse, and they're not interchanged. So the world is not flattened, and basically you need to look at how to participate in different camps. So Hong Kong Technology Startup, this is a Hong Kong TDC study. They expand to GBA, they think it's easy, my technology is good, so they just move to GBA. And then they do a survey, they found there are a lot of issues, right? Unfamiliar with policies. I have different friends that have tutoring companies. Actually, one friend that actually sold his want to sell his Shanghai tutor company for 40 million. It's a startup, 40 million Hong Kong dollars. Got the deal, and then got a new policy change, and then the guy just ditched, right? His 40 million becomes paper. So these kind of things happen if you are not familiar with the policies. You need to be familiar with the policies. Data policy, right? 1 year ago, there's none. Now, if you have data of 1 million plus people, you need to get approval before moving the data, even to Hong Kong. So how do you tackle that? Lack of connections. A lot of people think, doing business in China is easy, right? I have connection. But when you started to do in one city, and then you're trying to be a little bit successful, you suddenly find out that your stuff get copied very fast. And the people who copy you can do 25 cities. A lot of these kind of stuff happen. So it's not easy to do business in China just based on one connection, right? Besides connection, you need to roll out many cities at the same time. And this is not easy to do as a Hong Kong startup, because most of the Hong Kong startup are spending their time changing their technologies, just like what we do every day in ASTRI. Right? We are thinking about technology. If my technology is good, it's fine. It's not fine, because it's a real market that you need to grow. Access to SME financing. If you want to move to 25 cities, will the bank give you money, loan you money? Most of the time, no. If you're a startup. Right, so you get fund. Can you get fund easily? Not really. I mean, it's very difficult right now to get fund from the fund managers. Right, most of the fund managers already place their money and use them up. Right, hard to expand other cities in mainland. So these are the challenges that you face. Not just moving to GBA, it's moving to any part of mainland China. But there is hope. The government knows about it. Hong Kong government. They have spent 130 billion in INT. And if you look at the whole INT's ecosystem, Dr. Toa Charm and I just talked about it, it's very different now than 4 years ago. We're not talking about 10 years ago. These 4 years, actually, we see a lot of investment, a lot of government support, a lot of different INT ecosystem changes. So you look at venture capital, there's more money. Looking at the Hong Kong startups, you look at university collaborations, you look at the local startup, it changed from, I think 4 years ago, about 800, now it's 3,700. 12 unicorns plus emerge. And then if you look at the government support, they pump in 10 billion to 28 Hong Kong research labs. There are 16 state key labs. There are 6 CNELC Hong Kong projects. ASTRI is one of the 6. We are very proud. 5 applied R&D centers. So these are the things that we look at how we are having government support in terms of getting things rolling. Now, hardware side, right? We in technology always say hardware and software. Hardware side, right? 240 hectares in the Santine Technopole. 17 times the size of the current science park, which we're sitting in right now, right? Is in this area. So the hardware is there. It's more than enough. Actually, I think the government will have a hard time filling up these, honestly. But let's see what happens 5 years later. So the hardware is there, right? The support is there. However, we need to also get the software doing. What is software? It's the talent, right? It's you sitting in this room, you sitting in a Zoom, you in the GBA Business School. The software needs to be there in terms of university support. So you look at the GBA area, right? 7 campuses from Hong Kong University in the Shenzhen and Guangdong area. So they're already establishing their campus. 5 universities among the top 100 in the AI, the top 2 universities, Chinese U and Hong Kong UST. They're all having different investment in the Greater Bay Area. So we need to look at not just Hong Kong. If Hong Kong needs to be in the top, we need to be in the top of talent, and then using our talent to nurture the technology to be the top in GBA, top in China, top in the world. And ASTRI is positioned to be part of the INT ecosystem to do that. So if you look at ASTRI, we have 800 transfer technologies, 900 patents. Actually, we can have more patents, but because of money, we don't want to maintain that many, so we keep on scrapping it. And my team is telling that we should not scrap that many. But I don't think we should measure by the number of patents, but how we use the patents are very, very important. So how do we strengthen the INT ecosystem is looking at the different technologies. So you look at ASTRI, for example, we have 5 areas of technologies in terms of technology divisions. AI and big data, the trusted technologies, cybersecurity, cryptography, trusted technologies, communications, 5G, IoT and sensors, integrated circuits and system. And we are providing smart city, fintech, digital health, intelligent manufacturing, and applied integrated circuit. I think we are going to have a 6th initiative. I'm trying to think about that. It's the Metaverse, right? Because the world is looking in the Metaverse, and we are doing it already for a few years. So we should have a 6th initiative called Metaverse coming. And if you look at ASTRI, for example, we are actually providing technologies not just for Chinese customers, but also for Western customers. And we are positioned to help the Hong Kong INT ecosystem. So we want more people to use the technology. We want more spin-off startup from ASTRI to use the technologies to be successful. So if you look at the left side, we have Intel, NXP, ARM. You have the right side is China Mobile, Lenovo. All those are big customers from us. And if you look at the 5G core area, we are in the very advanced stage, right? We have the 5G expert sitting in the room can tell you that, our ORAN is teaching. He's teaching me what is ORAN, right? I spend a lot of time on radio access network, what is open radio access network, why it's important in 5G. But with the technology right now we have is the top of the world. So how to utilize them and help Hong Kong to be positioned in GBA and to the rest of the world is very important. Same for smarter and healthier GBA. Fintech. We are doing a lot of fintechs. The fintech area is a little bit different, right? Fintech is bounded by different laws in Hong Kong versus the mainland policies. So fintech is not as easy as 5G to be one technology going across different parts of the world. A lot of Hong Kong fintechs, when they were successful, become unicorn, did not participate in mainland. They choose to be in the Western camp, right? And because of different laws. And digital health and others, we are doing, partnering with Huawei and different technologies. We are partnering in different areas. Smart city, digital health, intelligent manufacturing, Metaverse is what we are doing with different partners, different technologies. And these are the areas that I think ASTRI can be very strong at. Integrated circuit, semiconductor. So again, we are learning in terms of how to really bridge the gap because semiconductor is a split world, right? If you look at right now what Intel is doing versus what Huawei is doing, basically people are not giving the chips to Huawei. So you're seeing a split in the camp. Now, traditionally, we are doing a lot of things from the Western world. Honestly, we are shifting in terms of partnering with China, Chinese Semiconductor Alliance. We just had a big conference last week on the the third generation integrated circuit. We have 8,000 attendees in Zoom. So these are the areas that we as ASTRI participants or employees want to look into how to become the East versus the West and how we integrate that. SME is also very important. So we have technologies, 7 areas that actually we are licensing different technologies for SME and startup. Our mainland strategy started with GBA. And this will happen with a lot of Hong Kong companies. A lot of Hong Kong companies will be moving to GBA and they're not sure how to do it. ASTRI already have 60 people in Shenzhen, but we are actually moving more partnerships to Shenzhen because we need the talent going. As I said, not just hardware, but actually the talent in terms of how we nurture the next INT generations. So we will be participate with Chinese local universities in the Greater Bay Area. We also be participating with the Hong Kong universities, the 7 campuses that are residing in GBA. So these 6 areas is actually across the board people are thinking about. If I'm in Hong Kong, I want to move to GBA, what do I look at? What is your cost structure? Can you afford the cost? Do you have additional business? ASTRI is the same, right? As I told the people, if we move more into Greater Bay Area, do we have more projects to support it? If we don't have more projects to support it, how can we afford it, right? And cost is one of the important elements. And cost not just involve people. Cost is, for a lab that do 3D integrated circuit. Now, do I get more cheaper parts when I buy in Shenzhen versus Hong Kong? right? These are the things that we need to look at. The procurement piece and staffing, location, how do you manage it, different money, channel collaboration, what is the R&D focus? These are the different areas that ASTRI needs to look at. It's not a simple answer, but how do we contribute to the 14 5-year plan? I believe talents is the most important thing if you look at the whole thing. Talents involving the I&T talents, and the talents involving how do you participate in GBA, and the talents also involving what is outside China. How do we go into different parts of business that we can evolve into? And again, just as my last slide, I want to talk about Hong Kong's role in strengthening the I&T ecosystem. I think we have the structure there, right? The government support, more funding, ASTRI as applied research center, applied technology solutions with, for example, Hong Kong productivity centers, incubation with more and more cyberport support, more and more science park support, universities in terms of different areas. I think we have the right infrastructure. I think the next 5 years, we want I&T to be as important or even more important as the finance industry and the real estate industry in Hong Kong. And this started with actually how do we nurture the talent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. So I think it's going to be a very good environment for all of us to work on. So we just learned from you about the GBA and also how, ASTRI position yourself in this I&T ecosystem. And we just talked about that before the panel. For the next 3 to 5 years, probably we have a very happy problem because every one of us in the I&T will be super busy, right? No matter which role you are in technical or marketing side. So I think definitely. But I think I would like to follow up with your presentation, excellent presentation, is how Hong Kong enterprises and also startup really can make use of technologies to help them to tap into the opportunities in Greater Bay Area, even about the ASEAN as well. So my first question to you is from your experience, when Hong Kong companies trying to get into Greater Bay Area, what sort of challenges they usually face?
Well, I think the most critical challenge when Hong Kong companies go into GBA is where your market is. Sure. So, if they're familiar with what Hong Kong customers and Hong Kong people are doing, are they familiar with what PRC customers and people are doing? Yep. One example is retail.
Yes.
Right. And if you look at retail, for example, Watson, mm-hmm. They actually opened 700 branches in the Greater Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And originally they faced a lot of challenge, right? Why people in China are not going to walk into your store and start sorting out things, right? Yeah. You need to O2O strategy. Exactly. You need to use WeChat to really get things going. You need to have the next generation store without people to attract them. Right. So all of these are technology driven that they need to change. So I think technology is a key piece that when people move to the Greater Bay Area, it's not just the traditional way of doing Hong Kong business. How do you go into that area and attract those customers?
Yeah, definitely. We heard about new retail, right? So this is pretty new, actually, to Hong Kong retailers. So I think we can still survive in Hong Kong, but when we tap into Greater Bay, it's another story. So any kind of specific example you can see when the enterprise from Hong Kong, they're getting into mainland China, how they get through all these hurdles and really make it maybe doing better business, even bigger market for them?
Well, I think how to tackle the market, as I say, and a lot of people think about, you need to think about, are you a decent sized business or are you a startup when you move into China? All right. Right. If you are a decent sized business, one example is, for example, Watson, I just talked about. Yep. And another example is, for example, the HSBC
Of course.
when they move into Greater Bay Area. Now, how do they use the fintech, which is within the China law, to attract the customers and provide some of the technologies that traditional Chinese banks do not have? And that's very difficult because if you look at Chinese Merchant Bank and ICBC, they have so many branches. So when HSBC move in there, right now they have a Greater Bay Area strategy to tackle that with fintech. So that kind of change, you need a lot of planning if you're a big business moving into GBA. Now, startup is a totally different game, right? Startup usually, if you look at a tech startup, they have a technology, and they have no idea what to do with the technology in the Chinese customers. And my anticipation is a lot of them actually get hurt when they go there and say, I want to go in there and just roll out to the market, and they find out that they just got copied, and then people are rolling out in different cities. So you need to have the plan in advance in terms of how do you push your technologies. And if you're a big enough companies, actually you might want to do some acquisition that actually have that in mind. And a lot of bigger companies are doing that.
Right. So would that be any differences? Because some of the enterprise right now, if we look at the positive side, we have the Greater Bay, just our labor, and we also have the ASEAN. You talk about the big market that you're familiar with, right? So would that be easier? I don't know whether I use the term easier. Would that be easier to go into the Greater Bay Area from Hong Kong company perspective, or is going to be easier to go into ASEAN path? Of course, it's a greedy guy who wanted both, but sometimes it's difficult, right?
Well, I think you need to think about what you want to do first and what type of technologies you are in first. So it's not one statement of how to get into both GBA and ASEAN. I think in the GBA perspective, it's easier because of the language of going in there and try out your product, whether it's fit for mainland. And if you are successful, and if you can get your IP protected, you can get very big. In ASEAN, a lot of the technologies are having huge population, and it's much easier to use because the law in ASEAN is very similar to the law in Hong Kong. So I find that a lot of the technology companies, when they move to ASEAN, usually they find partners. And in China, it's not as easy to find partners. And there are many partners, for example, in Indonesia, in Singapore, in Thailand, that want to have the high technology and they can roll out to the market. So I think if you are not willing to go with partners, probably GBA is easier. If you are going to have a JV type of strategy, probably ASEAN is easier.
Yeah, I think you also talk about we have at least 12 unicorns from Hong Kong. So congratulations for all of us, right? So just a few years. I think we just talked about 5 years ago when I joined Cyberport. There's probably no unicorn at all. Only at all. And when you talk about startups, the people about thinking about Chasanteng or somewhere in selling the all this hardware stuff then to put it all together. But today, when we talk about startup, everybody think about technologies, and we have 12. So the follow-up question: I see most of the tech startup right now seems that they're doing better in ASEAN rather than in Greater Bay or even the mainland China as a whole. So do you see what's the issue there, or the bigger? Actually, China is a bigger market, right? 1.4 billion people. Right.
Well, if you look at the unicorns I just listed, right, and SenseTime is probably the best example of the mainland success.
Right.
And honestly, their success actually has policy support. Right. They do a lot of different technologies because of the policy driven. For example, face recognition.
Yes, that's true.
You cannot do it in even in Hong Kong, right? You want to roll out face recognitions, you find some resistance of using face recognition.
Exactly.
So you need to be very much into the Chinese policy if you want to become successful in GBA, sense time, for example.
Yeah.
So why you said that why are so many companies easier from Hong Kong perspective to go to ASEAN? Because they are familiar with what they're doing in Hong Kong. If they move to ASEAN, they can be faster and easier. Just Relap Bank, for example, right? And they're very successful. And then they move into ASEAN, they find out that that market is actually penetrable. And when they start getting more fun, they actually bought what they call the Bank of Jakarta.
Yeah, Indonesia.
Right,
Yeah.
Indonesia.
Yeah.
They bought that bank, and then it becomes faster. Now they're coming back to Shenzhen in the GBA.
Yeah.
So that is a good model in terms of I'm successful in ASEAN. I come back and look into it. And Klook is an example, right? They're very successful in ASEAN. They spend a lot of energy and localization in ASEAN, in Japan, and now they're moving to GBA.
Exactly.
So a lot of times you find the biggest startup, it's easier to get an ASEAN partnership and then come back to become GBA. There are actually many examples that Singapore companies are now moving to GBA, and that's why I say Hong Kong is actually a good hub because they find that, for example, even in Singapore, in fact, Hong Kong is targeting a lot of Singapore companies to come back here.
Yeah, they did it first. They target Hong Kong companies to go to Singapore first,
true,
right?
True.
So we are just revenge, I guess. Yeah, put it this way. Back to here. Right? I know ASTRI is doing a lot for Hong Kong. You know, everybody with the white paper about blockchain, fintech, all that is actually a very excellent white paper. I learned a lot from that. Thank you so much. But in terms of enterprise, I know you also help enterprise, particularly in the technology side. So how can you help the enterprises from the technology perspective to help them to get into Greater Bay and help them to get into the ASEAN areas?
Well, I think technology in the end needs to be rolled out. And ASTRI, actually, the whole goal of ASTRI started with apply. You need to apply the technology. You need to commercialize it. So for example, when we do intelligent manufacturing, we can do a lot of stacking, dark factories, etc. And Hong Kong companies, we do not look into just Hong Kong. Honestly, before this, in the reindustrialization focus, not a lot of factories are in Hong Kong. Most of the factories either is in Dongguan or in ASEAN. So we actually help different companies in terms of how you stacking the different manufacturing sites and then roll out the technologies. Same as 5G, right? We have a lot of 5G technologies that can be applied to be used, same as IoT, right? We have a lot of AI back engine IoT that we started the technology focus and research in Hong Kong and then roll out to Greater Bay Area and roll out to the rest of the world. And I think ASTRI is one of the biggest kept secret, honestly. I mean, our 800 patents, somebody just told me before this meeting that there are few startups that actually use ASTRI technologies and then become startup and quite successful. I want to see more of that using the ASTRI technology and roll out, because we don't have a I would say a policy or a support structure to roll out to do implementation and maintenance. Now, it's good because we don't want to be competing with the different companies. But on the other hand, we want to be more well-known in terms of our technologies being replicated. So I'm actually talking to a lot of enterprises right now, and many of the companies looking at reindustrialization, for example, are talking to ASTRI in terms of how they roll out their whole factory renovation type of technologies.
Yeah, I think in terms of the strategy, I think ASTRI probably can do even more in terms of the open innovation, right? The enterprise, they open it up, they want to get some IPs, and at the same time, enterprise also have some IPs, right? So if we can get this kind of IPs helping the enterprise and start to make use of it, that would be great. Would that be something you're working on too?
We are working on actually in both angles, right? In the enterprise side, we want to do actually our what we call the post-income license.
Okay.
We actually grew about 4 times this year.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is good. we want to see more of those. Is people using our technology licensing to really roll out to different implementations. I think ASTRI, the issue is we are managed by projects. So everybody's thinking about project, and not a lot of focus on how do we roll out the commercialization.
Exactly.
And we want to do more of those.
Yeah, I heard some of the larger multinational company, they actually doing IP hackathon. So they actually let the IP out and then let the startup use the IP, and then how do you make use of it. So if they want it, rather than give them cash reward, so they give them the right to use the IP. And they get actually a few percent or 10% back from the startup. So it's another kind of investment. Yeah.
This is a very good initiative, and we are doing that. Not the hackathon per se, but we are actually broadcasting more of our technologies in terms of social media, video. And we want the enterprises to look into that, because honestly, a lot of Hong Kong enterprises do not have enough I&T research.
Exactly.
Right. So if they can replicate, if they can save 80%, 70% of the effort, and they just do the last 20%, we would love to do that.
Yep. Just a side question, just always bugging me still. A lot of startups ask me whether they should file patent of the. So somebody really scared about file patent because that is the best way the big company can steal it and sue you, and you don't have money to play with them, then eventually they win, right? So how do you see this kind of thing?
I first of all, in ASTRI technology, we had a debate last couple of weeks in terms of should we have more patents? We have about 900 patents, right? Should we have more or less? And my feel is patents got outdated very fast. So you got a patent, and if you stick there for a few years, it's a no-use patent. So we need to keep on maintaining it.
Okay.
So in ASTRI, actually, we look into our patents, and basically we have a strategy that anything over 6 years, we need to revisit whether we should sell it, we should scrap it. Some of them are too old that we can scrap it, and basically try to clean it up. Now, startup, I think we need startup to have patents. And patents actually will protect them in terms of not so easy to copy their technology. If you look at, you have a lot of experience. A few years ago, there are actually a lot of startups that are very successful and got copied. And those are the ones that do not have patents. So if you ask me, in terms of a big research institute like us, we should have less. In terms of startup, we should have more.
All right, got it. Now, when we were talking about small, I think you touched on that point too in your presentation about SME. 98% of our companies in Hong Kong are SME, but they are far, far behind in terms of the digital war, right? So COVID is actually helping accelerate a little bit. So more people using e-commerce. But when we talk about digital transformation, it's not just e-commerce. There's a lot more things. So how ASTRI can play a role to really help the SME in Hong Kong to be more digital savvy and help them to, transform to be a more competitive companies?
Now, SME do not want to spend money. So when they think about ASTRI, they usually, the feedback is quite scary, right? They say, oh, your project is a few million Hong Kong dollars. How can I afford it? So we are revamping the SME strategy. Instead of, scaring the SME away, we are saying that, okay, we will break apart our technology consultancy into 7 to 10 areas. And each area, I want to put a price tag into it. And the price tag is within 50,000 to 100,000. So we get the SME trained in terms of what the capability is to use our license. And we actually give them areas so that they can try. If they are successful in rolling out or using our license, then we start charging them. So give you an example, right? Hong Kong has a lot of listed company. Each listed company needs to have a ESG report. And ASTRI already has the technology to use AI to look into what they are doing and then provide a ESG report. Now, this is an area that is interested in a lot of SMEs are doing this kind of ESG stuff.
Yeah.
And nobody knows it. That's why I say ASTRI is always a self-kept secret. And I want to roll out as part of the strategy is, for example, if you give ASTRI a cost basis, let's say a consultancy $50,000, can I provide a ESG report for your company so that you can comply with the Hong Kong exchange rule? Sure. So it's one example that we are trying to be not a million type project, but going the scale to fit the SME.
Yeah, but definitely they badly need it. I mean, they need a lot of help. Otherwise, it's out of the game, particularly in the digital era, right? So my another question probably is on the talent side. So you have so many good talents in ASTRI, but not all the company around in Hong Kong, they have that kind of luxury. So how do you see the talents development in terms of the digital in Hong Kong? So how ASTRI can really help on this? Right?
Well, I think it's ASTRI should become a 少林寺, right? And the issue right now, I tell you, is we got a very high attrition rate, right?
Very high attrition rate.
Because if you are an expert in technology, you probably can get a higher paid job outside. Yeah. Just to be very honest with you.
Congratulations, guys. No, just kidding.
And on the ASTRI side, it's very interesting, right? And when I talk to the technology leaders, they always want to hire back a very senior engineer that they lost. Okay. For example, a guy went to Huawei, right? Very senior, knows everything about 5G. So if my leader wants to replace this guy, he always think about, how do I find a senior engineer that knows this 5G technologies that can replace that guy? I think at the end, if we think like this, we will have a talent hole. So I think the way that we should think about is how to nurture the university talent. Those who get the master and PhD degree on 5G, they might need training, they might need mentorship, they might need to study the technologies, but get them in and then have them really build up the technology. Maybe they will leave in 5 years, and I congratulate them, right? Because the industry needs them. That's okay. But how do we build up the whole talent pool is not just ASTRI, right? The whole government needs to think about. And one of the most worrisome areas that I think about is, if you look at today, the Hong Kong master and PhD student in the technology field, my rough estimation is 60-70% are from mainland. And it's nothing wrong with from mainland. It's just why are the Hong Kong mother tongue people not wanting to study master and PhD degree in engineering computer science? If I&T is going to be a pillar that we want to be proud at, we need the Hong Kong students who are STEM related to really not just get the bachelor degree and find a job in Goldman Sachs to become a digitech person, but really keep on studying. That's one thing. And the second thing we need to look at is how do we exchange talents between Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Shenzhen has a lot of talents. And the Hong Kong, for example, in ASTRI in Hong Kong, we should be learning from what the Shenzhen companies, the Shenzhen universities, what they give at, and do the exchange. And the third thing is, ASTRI should also be a ground of external universities outside to come back. If you look at the US university, top 15 universities, I have a lot of parents saying me, oh, my son is doing master degree in engineering, computer science. 5 years ago, I could find a job in Silicon Valley. Now I don't get a visa. Every year they need to do a lottery before they know that the next year they're going to stay in US. So they want to come back to Hong Kong. And the whole impression, both the parents and the kid, is Hong Kong has no job for master or PhD student in engineering. That is totally wrong, right? And we are looking for talent, and then they think there's no job. And also for ASEAN and Indian students, have we tackled that? Hong Kong is the easiest place to get a work visa. Why aren't they coming? I mean, InnoCell is what, 4,000 Hong Kong dollars if they want a place to stay. Of course, it's share room, right? 7,000 for the whole room. Taiwan, for example,
Yes.
right? If Taiwan people, students, they do a PhD, they come to Hong Kong for work, they got a bump up in pay. So has the government do the job of recruiting from outside? Has the government do the job of exchanging talents between Hong Kong and Shenzhen? That's why I always say the software is not enough. Software is not there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I think remember 30 years ago when I studied in the United States, I already approached by the Singapore EDP. I think the economic board, something like that. And do you want to work in Singapore? So actually, they went to the campus and recruit you. About 30 years ago.
No, so right. Me too. I mean, I probably is 20 years ago. I'm a little bit younger.
You're younger than me. That's good. That's good. Good news.
But when I went to Berkeley, right, master degree, when I was talking to my kid, why do they have, they were looking for finance job, unfortunately. And they are doing what? First interview, second interview, third interview, very difficult. And I was saying when I walk out to the Berkeley, the whole platform, the plaza, right? People are just, IBM, all this, please come in, please come in. I don't need to do interviews. It's just pick a company and join. Now the world is different. Those guys don't have U.S. companies to hire them. They don't have the visa.
It's a very good timing. So I think both ASTRI and even Hong Kong government, like Invest Hong Kong, you want to recruit company to come to Hong Kong, right? Which is something like work in Hong Kong. So we go out proactively to recruit those graduates from all over the world to come back. So to work for ASTRI or other company. All the startup I'm helping, they always ask my question. One is patent. The other one is where I can recruit the tech talents. We do not have enough. So it's always a common challenge for all these startups and even company, large company. If you are not Google or Facebook, it's very hard to hire that kind of people. Right? So I think your suggestion is very good. How about we can proactively go out and, now we have the enough big ecosystem that we can, actually hire them.
Yes,
definitely. That's very good. So I think it's time to open it up to Q&A. So definitely you have more questions than me you want to ask, our board CEO here, right? So any questions, so feel free to ask, please. So we can pass a mic to you when you have a question. Anyone want to start? Sure. Dicky. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is Dicky from the VP GBA Business School. And first of all, thank you, Toa and Denis. So excellent presentation, Denis. And I heard that GBA is so important, probably to ASTRI as well. Do you have any idea or roadmap for expanding into the GBA for ASTRI?
Yes, we do, and actually we are playing a very aggressive position to expand into GBA. So first of all, we're looking for a larger campus. We have an office there. We have about 60 people in Shenzhen right now, and we are looking for a larger campus in terms of getting more people, and also we are looking into more labs. Because honestly, in Hong Kong, when we have this building, but when we try to do more innovative labs, it's going to be very expensive. So if we can do more labs in the Shenzhen area, we can actually have more exposure. And secondly, my most important key is talent. So we are talking to both the Hong Kong universities that are in the Shenzhen campus and also the local universities. In terms of having our projects in Shenzhen participating by those master and PhD students. Because not just benefiting them in terms of they really have projects that can commercialization, it also benefit our team in Hong Kong because with the exchange, they can learn more in terms of the Greater Bay Area.
That's good news. So definitely, I always think we should create some super mega startup from Hong Kong by marrying with the Shenzhen because they have a lot of talents. We have our own strength, right? So adding together, who knows? We can have a Facebook, could have a Meta, of course, and Google Alphabet, right? From Hong Kong, right? So I think with the Greater Bay Area, that would be a possibility. Yeah, good.
Absolutely.
Right. Next question. Yeah, sure.
what is your thought on expanding our alumni network so that we can bridge the gap between what ASTRI can do and what our customer can do?
Alumni, that's good.
I think SG alumni actually, when I say Siu Lam Ji, right, there are a lot of companies when I go outside that actually have the they were from ASTRI, and what my approach is if they're still working on different research projects, I really want to embrace them. So I'm personally asking for meetings with them, with our technology team, in terms of how do we leverage our new technology that they can use and they can roll out. That's one thing. Second thing is, I think we should pull together a list of the different startup companies or research institutes that have ASTRI related. For example, one of the ASTRI alumni from one of our technology group went to get funding and get a big funding from Inno Hong Kong. And they're doing a different technology maybe with Hong Kong UST. And they are happy to partner with ASTRI. And right now, I think we need to look into how do we expand that. And even, the annual, what we call Technovation Summit, I was thinking that we should have an alumni session that we can gather the people together on the technology front. Now, ASTRI does a lot of technologies, and it's not one to fit all. So a 5G alumni is different than an integrated circuit alumni. It's different than a fintech alumni. So I think we need to separate those into different areas so our current employees can work with the technology areas of those who went out and have a bigger partnership.
Very good idea. I remember that like P&G or McKinsey. So they have a very good alumni group. So they still keep the relationship in the ecosystem. It will be very effective if you can get it going. So it's a very good question, a very good suggestion as well. So and any other questions, please? Someone from the back? I always want to ask questions from the back. So, okay, in the middle as well. That's good. Yeah.
So, Dr. Yip, I think you mentioned a number of times about change and how the world is changing. How do you anticipate or how do you prepare ASTRI to adapt the change? How does ASTRI play a role in the changing world?
ASTRI in the changing world, I think we need to think about ASTRI, right? And a lot of people think about ASTRI as Hong Kong only. And the way I think about it is we started from Hong Kong. We use our talents in Hong Kong. We should connect with the Hong Kong INT ecosystem. So, for example, I'm reaching out to Cyberport. I'm reaching out to Science Park. I'm reaching out to the different universities on the INT side. And our projects that we do should be outside Hong Kong. Now, this is an idea that not everybody in the government support it, right? They think that ASTRI is a semi-government organization. We should only do projects from Hong Kong. It's the same as unicorn. If you only think of Hong Kong, you will never become a unicorn. You will never become a unicorn. Right. So ASTRI is the same, right? You want to have the impact of the INT ecosystem. You cannot just think about Hong Kong. Now, we of course have technologies that have been used with Huawei, Lenovo, Intel, so both in China and the Western world. But are these three enough? Should we, when we say it should be like 30 or 40 biggest companies that are using ASTRI technology, then the Hong Kong INT ecosystem can reach out outside Hong Kong. And that's what I want to change into.
That's good. Maybe last question before we adjourn. Make use of this opportunity, right? Last question. Anyone? Okay, that's great.
Hi,
Phoebe.
Dr. Yip. For ASTRI, under the situation you just mentioned, like the US cam, China cam, what's the competitive edge of ASTRI in such situation?
If you look at ASTRI, right, we are very interesting. That's why I always say ASTRI is bridging the East and the West. We have projects that are really used mostly in mainland. For example, integrated circuit projects. But then the integrated circuit community in China expect ASTRI to be in all the US consortium. So we cannot really be just sitting there and say, I am mainland, and not reaching out to the West, because the West actually have great technology that ASTRI can use. And even in integrated circuit, it's very separated between China and US. ASTRI still has the role there. So I think ASTRI is quite unique in the sense that we have customers usage that's a lot in mainland, and also we have customer usage in the Western world. And that's the unique advantage, that if we not just limit to ASTRI, but having partnership with different companies that can cross the East and the West, then we'll be very successful. We're not there yet, but I think we should participate both in the mainland camp and also in the US camp in terms of technology.
Thank you so much. I think time is about up. So thanks again. We learned a lot from Denis, and we are so grateful and thankful we have ASTRI in Hong Kong and helping all the startup enterprises and SME to grow, particularly in the digital. Thanks again, Denis.
Thank you. Dr.
Thank you
Cham.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, on behalf of GBA Business School, I need to say a big thanks to Dr. Toa Charm and Dr. Denis Yip. And I have something for you, but before giving this certificate to you, I want to say I'm happy, very happy to hear that ASTRI want to be a 少林寺, maybe for techie. And actually, we both our organization are showing the same thought, because we want to be a 少林寺 for entrepreneurs. So maybe this is why we are good partnering. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, maybe first of all, okay. So a little bit of okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.